Okay, welcome everyone to another meeting of the Minotaur Book Club, brought to you in part by the Maryland Forward Party and the Sociological Imagination Group. This is a chance for us to get together and just chat about a variety of different things um, that are interesting to us. A lot of people have different opinions, both in media and books, but also amongst ourselves. So this gives us a chance to sort of look at popular opinion, compare it against the realities that we see on a daily basis.
Get Wi-Fi vote.
Yeah.
For me, it
Arnie,
was terrible.
Yeah, I'm here.
yeah, you want to tell us a little bit about the Minotaur Book Club and where you picked the name from?
Okay, I'm looking at for the manuscript I'm working on. I'm looking at recurring factors and patterns at turning points in history, and looking at the myths as well as the realities. And one of the really early myths is the story of King Minos on Crete, who wants to rule by divine rule and makes a deal with Poseidon to be a divine ruler. And to seal the pact, Poseidon sends a beautiful bull to be sacrificed to signify the deal. The bull is so beautiful that Poseidon decides to keep it. Poseidon gets upset and has his wife Persephone fall in love with the bull. Persephone talks to the architect Daedalus of Dying Through Wax Wings fame to build a facsimile of a cow, which she enters, and then Poseidon, in the form of the bull, enters her, producing the Minotaur, half man and half beast, who symbolizes throughout the ages anytime a leader gains prominence through lies that allows him to capture wealth, power, and governance through illicit means. And unleashing the Minotaur, which is then used to extract tribute from Greece, and the founder of Greece, Theseus, will subdue the Minotaur, allowing for the possibility of overcoming the beast and producing Greek democracy.
All right. Well, we certainly to hold on to our democracy, not to mention create it in the first place. You know, we have to take the reins on certain things and not use them for personal gain. All right, we'll get into a little bit on the democracy awakening here and where we're going. So we're going to use our prioritized problems discussion format. We'll do it somewhat loosely, but we'll give us a premise here of like what are some of the problems that we see Heather Cox Richardson tackling in here, and maybe what are some of the problems that we see being created by some of the pieces that are here, and then look at those, because when we create new problems, or when we try to solve problems, we can often create other problems or make other problems worse. And knowing which problems we should not make worse when solving problems, it can make all the difference in the world, so that we can solve as many problems as possible. That's the goal. All right, I'm going to jump out of the full screen share version here, and then we can start talking about things that we saw. And Arnie, do you have any things that you want to kick off from your point of view? Give us like a couple minute frame.
Yeah, her history is wonderful and accurate, but I have a problem with the way she frames the issue of equality, which has at least 4 different meanings. And she talks about that we are born equal. And if you remember a discussion of Federalist 10 and Madison, we were born with equal rights, but with different talents and ambitions. And as a result of the different talents and ambitions, we will have unequal outcomes. And nowhere in the Constitution, except maybe later in some of the amendments, is there anything to preserve, protect, and instill institutions that give people the opportunity for equality. not outcome equality as an outcome, but equality as opportunity. That I seem to me has been in the Constitution, in Supreme Court decisions, and in acts of power by the Congress and presidents. Sporadically, we burst out and try to provide a greater equality of opportunity, mostly unsuccessfully. And so that in reconstituting the new kind of democracy that she wants us to go for, I think we need a strong pre-new constitutional convention or whatever process is used to really take a look at what is meant by equality. Because remember, there's a difference between the ideology and the facts. And the facts are that all of our founders were enslavers and abusers of people. And so the works of the Constitution, I would argue, based on Federalist 10, Federalist 50, 48 and 50, and some of the attempts since then by the court to overturn the some of the 14, 15, 13, 14, 15th, and 16th Amendments, point to the work of the Constitution as being to create the very conditions we have now. Trump is not an operation. He is a product of our historical past.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, I'll give some thoughts and I'll toss around and we can go around the room and get some sort of initial thoughts. And if there's anything you want to put up onto the board, let me know. My general sort of look at this was I wanted to rename the book as Democratic Awakening versus Democracy Awakening. Because I was looking back at a lot of the different points and having lived through a bunch of it and all the stuff that we've read and the context of things, there are more points to the issues. Like I remember listening to some, like if you're listening to the Democratic media and approach on that, everything that she lists out in here, like, oh yeah, I remember that, this happened, that happened, that happened, and that describes it from that point of view. And there were a few other things, and there were some other things happening, and there were some pieces of it, and it didn't represent, the fullness of what we could do. And so that brought me back around to kind of thinking about, like, what is it that gets us beyond this? Kind of like Arnie was saying there, if we did hold a constitutional convention, as many people have tried across the years, what will we do in that? How could we overcome this? We do have so many institutional thoughts that reinforce this idea of the special outcome, or the special leader. And I thought that was one thing that I'll wrap up with, is that I thought, I'm going to put on this board here, we have come from a monarchy style background where it was this idea of find the right people, find the right person to put them in charge and let them make all the decisions. And that has caused a lot of problems, and then there's this sense that she talks about in the book of that it being hereditary. And so, oh, well, then it must be something about this person. So we're going to hand it down to their offspring, and everything's going to be traced out by bloodlines until somebody else, takes over. And the American experiment was one of the first really strong ways to get out of that and to say it's not driven by blood. But it also set up an unequal place to say this type of people, white landed or landowners, is better than others and should rule. And that there was that inherent racial bias still setting out to say that there's something about people that makes them better than another. And that was baked in. So as we keep doing everything that we're doing, we keep coming back around to people saying, I'm better than you because I belong to this class. And it's not true. So, but how do you get around centuries, if not millennia, of that level of thinking to really waken people up to the alternative. So, those are my thoughts going in. Who wants to go next?
Is that a different version, additional explanation of unequal outcomes, or is that a separate topic?
Yeah, that'll be a separate topic. I'll figure out the best way to phrase it. Whoever goes next.
Yeah, I'll just say kind of briefly. Yeah, I agree with a couple points you made. My sense of reading this book was it was at times I felt like it was a condensed version of the previous book we read. Didn't have quite the depth on some of the topics. Yeah, definitely Democratic lean. Yeah, really didn't get. Yeah, really get that kind of that one-sided perspective on the history. Not that it wasn't accurate on the points that she was making, but I agree with your point there. I also felt like it kind of ended without offering much in the way of solutions. That's what it felt like to me. I can go back and look, but it didn't seem that way. It was more of like a let's hang in there type ending. That's the way it felt. Yeah, and I'll gather some of my other thoughts, but that was just kind of my initial take on the book.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Brandon. I was thinking about this last night, and I have to admit I'm probably about 25 pages out from the end, and I keep waiting for some sort of action or answer, and I'm not too sure. I guess it's not coming.
So, well, you might have a different take than me, but it didn't seem to come.
Because to me, it was truly a narrative, right? Like of recent history. And then it sort of jumps into part 3 where she's now going back, right? And she's going to recap maybe how we got here. What did strike you? So I agree with you a lot, Brandon, on just your interpretation of the book. And additionally, though, I think it would be interesting if we were to fast forward like 15, 20 years in the future, 25 years in the future, and somebody reads this book, right? Because I think some of it is there's this closeness to it right now. It's like, oh, this just felt like I heard this on the news obviously, we just heard this on the news a few years ago.
Yes.
Versus sort of looking it back from a different lens in the future might have a very different perspective on this book. Yeah, and it's very easy to read, I think, because it is this sort of condensed version of We the People on some level. But yeah, I keep waiting for her to maybe pose some solutions or some actions, and I'm not seeing it. And that's okay. Maybe that's what she didn't necessarily intend to do. It is called, what's the subtitle? Notes on the State of America. So she really truly wrote it just, I think, as sort of almost as if she's penning letters or doing a narrative, right?
Brandon, could you spell out the way in which you see it as one-sided? What's the other side?
Good question. Let me see if I can articulate that better. I'm not saying the other side. Let's see. I mean, from the beginning of the book, it felt like early on in the book, you could tell it was going to have a democratic lean to it. Like, so some of like maybe recent events. Again, I'm not saying I disagreed with any. I'm not saying that I disagreed with what she was saying.
No, I'm just
but I felt like she left. I felt like, when it came to recent events, you were in. I felt like we weren't getting any bit of the maybe conservative perspective or Republican perspective. It felt like it was very much. You could tell early on that it was a Democrat left-leaning take on it. Now, I'm not saying I disagree with that, but it felt like that. Maybe not throughout the book. But at times, for some of the points you made or some of the stories she was telling, some of the narrative was kind of like quick. Like, I'm just going to get this in and let you know where I stand on certain things, and then it was kind of not a lot of depth as much depth as maybe say We the People, where it was very, very historical, maybe not as much, maybe not as subjective as this book was. I don't know. That's just the way I felt. I'm not saying it's the right.
I agree with you on that. I'm just trying to understand. I don't want to disagree, but I do agree that that's missing. I'm just trying to put in my mind,
Yep.
if she had done it, what would you have wanted her to say?
That's a good question, and I don't know, because I'm trying to come at it from the because I think I agreed with, she was speaking to me and probably a lot of other people that lean left. So like from that standpoint, I didn't disagree with everything I was reading, but it was also clear to me that at times the story she was telling, or at times points she was making, just maybe didn't feel as deep. It was just like, I'm gonna say that. And again, but there's also the historical perspective that no one can argue with, like what happened with slavery and civil rights and the amendments and how the powerful were always trying to keep people down. Like that's, not arguing with those points. I guess I'm also comparing it with the previous book we read, and how that felt very much had like historical depth to it compared to this one.
Agreed.
If I could offer in a context on that is this, I'm going to say something which is what I feel, and then see if it matches with what you're saying. Which is that, like, our last author for what was her name?
Jill Lepore.
Jill Lepore. Yep. That We the People, with it being that book. That, like, being an educator, she went through and very systematically laid out the different pieces of stuff. Another thing that I have just really enjoyed about us as book club, is going through and reading a bunch of different books, some obscure, some introducing things. Like you could see in there that she had not read the Bruce Johansson's book about the Native Americans and the Iroquois Confederacy, because she dropped in the word of the Confederacy as the first form of government that we had that was obviously flawed. I forget how exactly he said it, but there was no context of where the idea of a confederacy came from. And so like there's missing pieces, which makes it hard to have a discussion.
Yeah, I think, the way I kind of was reading it a bit, Brandon, because I think you were hitting on something that it didn't have the depth. To me, again, it was almost, I didn't hear much different than maybe I had gotten in my news feeds or seen, you know what I mean? It was sort of like, there was sort of a representation and a regurgitation of things that I had already watched on television or seen through my social media feeds or just watched and had seen. So to me, it was like every time I'd read something, I go, oh yeah, I kind of remember when that happened. And obviously your social media feeds and maybe the news you're watching is also just reflective of your own perspectives, right? Unless you do go outside
right,
outside and look at different channels. So a lot of what I was seeing just felt really familiar, right? And it was like, I wanted just a little bit more of an edge to it, where she might question something or bring in a different perspective. And I didn't really get a lot of that. I'm not saying it's been an interesting read, and sort of a time, going back through history and remembering all of this. But I think I really wanted something more out of it.
Yeah. I want to go to Matt if you want to chime in. So I invited Matt to join us with way too little time to actually read the book. So I don't expect you to say anything with regards to the book itself. But if you wanted to offer anything into just what you're hearing or in responses, I wanted to give you a chance.
Well, that's why I purposely waited to be last, so I could get other perspectives. And I will say that every single post that Heather Cox Richardson does on line to media is like a mini book itself. Like she puts out all these posts and they're like really, really long. trying to, I guess, encapsulate everything that has gone on in like the now of what happened. So she does have lots and lots of commentary on everything. That said, I believe Arnie said that she started with everyone's born with equal rights, and I guess that really depends on what country you're in, because at the founding of our country, I definitely have to point out the flaw in that. I mean, if you were black, born in the U.S., you certainly didn't have rights to vote or property, and if you're a woman, same situation. Couldn't even open a bank account until, like, I believe 1970s, like, or 60s, around there. So I do fundamentally disagree with that. But I couldn't really commentate on what I felt like was the leaning of the book, but I'll just take everyone else's feedback on that. And that's about all I can comment on, I think.
We're in agreement on that, Matthew. That was my critique of her also.
Cool.
Yeah.
That she just picked one meaning of equality and missed the more important ones.
Yeah, and there was an intent or in there to kind of say that, we've been fighting against this, for a while, and that's part of the spirit of it. And I go kind of back and forth on this. I was chatting with somebody today who actually lives in Germany, and we were talking about modern politics and German politics and mixture together, and she was saying, like, I don't know very much about American history going back to a certain state, or back to a particular period. And so I was talking about you go back into the 60s, where it was worse than it is today. And even though we are where we are right now and it's bad, it was worse. And then you go back to like Andrew Jackson, and where, he, like, if you marched a whole bunch of, Native Americans now, across the field and killed off, a whole bunch of them moving from one place to the next. Like, I don't think people nowadays could even imagine what that's like. And so we keep getting better, but we keep going through these cycles where we forget the lessons that we learned, and then we do it all over again. Maybe not as bad as last time, but still bad. And how do we break out of that cycle, or how do we, at least get ourselves out of this next cycle to climb up further?
But Pete, I'm curious. You said you were talking to somebody who was German.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I have heard some Germans kind of say they sometimes keep a little bit of that history alive, their ugliness of their history alive, because they never want to forget and they never want to repeat.
Yeah.
So I was just curious what maybe her response was, or his or her response. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, is it, so, it was funny to start off because she was like, we're really pulling for you. We're here to support you in whatever ways we can, as you go through this difficult period, but we know what this is like. And, we see the patterns, we see, picking people off the streets and putting them into concentration camps, and that was what happened over here. And, it was like keeping this sort of knowledge of what that was and what that was like. At the same time, it's not firsthand knowledge for her and for, a good number of the people that are over there. So I'm not sure kind of where she stands. I couldn't speak for her as far as like, or for Germany in general, as to how real it seems to them. And you've always got your outliers. I did a trip to Germany this over last summer, and one of the trips that I was doing sightseeing, somebody was like, "Oh, and that's the hall, where Hitler rebuilt this thing," and was talking about a bunch of different stuff, and started taking off, and here's the place where they'd had the book burning. And so people come around here and they created this memorial, so that we would never have this kind of a book burning again. And walked off to the next destination. And there were two people that hung around in that tour. Just people were trying to take pictures of the book burning memorial. They stood right on top of the memorial and they were like posing in front of the place where Hitler was, like, "Look, I'm here, I'm at that spot," and they felt no compunction whatsoever about being so forward that they were there to walk the history of Hitler himself. And that shocked me, just how brazen that was, even inside of Germany, from all the things that I've heard before. But some people just felt like I don't have to hide the fact that I think Hitler was on the right track.
Pete, can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
In the 1850s, there was a movement that used the word awakenedness to describe the state or quality of being roused from sleep or inaction. It's formed by adding the suffix "ness" to the adjective awakening or awaked. Historically, that's where the current word woke comes from, and the effort to other those people which are characterized as being woke is directly related to what you're talking about. In Germany, they're staying woke, and we're trying to suppress wokeness.
So what is that Stein woke? Not like a Stein. What's that? What would be the translation of that?
Woke as in awake, alert, acknowledging your history, learning from your history, not living just in the present without no sense of how what's happening today is predicated on the past and prescriptive of a possible future.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see how the word woke is being used as a pejorative today, is to keep us from being aware of that history that allows us to understand where we come from and where we're going. That's why they're banning books and cutting out college courses.
I was wondering if I could make one last comment and then I got to roll.
Yeah.
So to your question about the cycle, and that is definitely very real and it happens. My thought to that is when we have a progressive faction that tries to be too progressive, we get in response another faction that gets too counter aggressive to that, because people don't like too much change. And so if you start reaching out and sparking fear when you go too much progressive, too forward, too fast. So good change happens in slow incremental levels, I believe. This is just my belief. And I think that would prevent a cycle of going forward really fast. Hold on, let's put the brakes on, let's tear everything down kind of thing, which is the cycle part that I think we're in right now with this current administration. And it just doesn't get us anywhere good, because the only great way to go forward and strongly is to do incremental change towards fixing what's the problem and then building upon that. And we have done that actually through the 60s and 70s pretty progressively, incrementally. Even though we had radical law that changed the Civil Rights Act in the late 1960s, we still didn't implement it into a really quick way. It took time, it took steps, and trying to find the different parts where the Civil Rights Act didn't actually fully accomplish everything. And that's what we should look at. Instead, we had Democrats that just always looked forward. We got to like go into this gender war. We got to go into all this. And I agree, we should have equal rights to everyone, but going too far, too fast, just people aren't ready to be tolerant of it. And that's just my view of that.
Thank you. It makes me think of some of the work that I do in coaching folks. And you can definitely see that experience when things go too fast, when you introduce a bunch of things of like, you must change, you must do this. We're changing completely the way that we operate, and it does spark fear, and it does spark a bunch of different responses to it. I find that I sort of shortcut it, then come back, but like, if the change is tied to the people, I've actually seen people who started off fearful of change move to change really fast. But the pivotal point was that they needed to know that the change was going to make their life better by solving problems that they had. And that one of the biggest disconnects that I'm tackling when I walk in is that they get dumped on either a small change or a large piece of a change. That's completely disconnected. And that's one thing where the incremental or progressive change, it gives a chance for those people to look at this and say, hey, this is not making my life better. This is making my life work, which gives everybody else around them a chance to look at, oh, well, maybe there's something we could change for this. We could adapt for this to make a thing that actually is making life better for everybody. And then as you do that progressively, then people start developing trust and they start working together, and then they start becoming more willing to change more things in a quick way. But it starts with starting slow is not a bad idea.
Agreed, and I like how you threw in the word trust there. That is exactly it.
Matthew, are you going to have to leave now?
I can stay for a little bit.
I was going to save this to the very end, but let me throw it in now. And
Okay.
you guys may want to have me leave the group after I finish. I cannot live with genocide in Gaza. I cannot live with children being separated from their parents in Texas. I cannot live with people being thrown into jails in Ecuador without due process. I cannot wait for gradual change. The abomination of what's happening now requires action now, beyond resistance. We're in a moment of great evil, as far as I'm concerned. And while ranked choice voting and the other things will be nice coming out on the other side, I cannot see my tax money being used to kill children in a school in Iran. I cannot wait.
I find that understandable in that position, so I don't fundamentally disagree with you.
Okay. And I don't disagree with you either. I guess it's just different times require different strategies. There are times when there is time for patience and change, and there are times when if you wait too late, it's too late.
I agree with that. The problem is in the time that we have now, there needs to be a better strategy employed to get things done because, well, they're not in power, the ones that want the change that you're looking for. So the only way you accomplish that is to get in power.
There's a book coming out in June that I will recommend that we pick up in July or August. It's by Tad Stomer, Stoermer, called The American History of Resistance. I'm coming from him. I'm coming from Jeffrey Sachs, economics professor at Columbia and an advisor to the United Nations. I'm coming from John Mearsheimer, the premier political scientist in the United States, who has a theory of in an anarcho world like we live in, where there is no global order, we have to rely on the self-interest of national states. But even he is now in agreement with Sachs that the moment that we're in is just leading way too fast to too much. I have no words to describe what's happening now.
Matt, before you go, can I just ask maybe a clarification of the point you made earlier? So you were saying it might not work out if we go too far too fast. When you say too far too fast, are you referring to like quote unquote like the left or kind of wokeness? That those terms, I don't really like to use those terms myself, but just trying to understand what you're referring to when you say too far too fast, or were you referring to the Democratic Party kind of in that sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I understand. Like, I get your point. The way when I've heard people talk about this, like, you know, to me, it feels like in the history of our country, it's been just decade after decade, centuries of people fighting, pleading for more equality, sacrificing, you know, dying for more equality. And then it's like the people that aren't looking for more equality because they're in a position of power. It's like we get to a point where they're like, okay, you've gotten all you can get, no more. And it's like, of course the pendulum is going to go a little bit further. At least in my mind, it seems like, of course it's going to go a little bit further than people want, because it's just people fighting all the time to get more and more equality. And it's like, now the people that aren't looking for it because they feel like they're fine or in a position of power, is it right for them to say, okay, you better know exactly where to stop, or else I'm going to start complaining that you're getting too much? That's the way I feel about it. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but I don't know. So it's interesting to I don't know. That's what I think about when I hear that argument. Not that I understand where people are coming from, but that's just the way I feel about it.
I think that's fair, and I wanted to clarify more that a lot of the issues that Arnie mentioned were more global, worldwide spread, and those aren't actually the issues I was more talking about. I was talking more domestically at home.
Yeah.
And the way we were like, there was during the pandemic time, a response where whether you've had a sex change or not, it was 100% a woman. So you had to treat somebody 100% a woman. And I think that's where it sparked most of the backlash. And then the left started saying, well, we need to just push them into women's sports then. And I think there's a pathway to do that, but the way that it was bludgeoned in, I don't think was the right way. We need to work on, if we want tolerance and acceptance, we need to understand that we need to offer tolerance and acceptance too. And those are fundamental big changes that if you're going to get a widespread acceptance on, you need to set the example of what you need in response. And that's more what I was talking about.
Yeah, no, and I do think it's important for certain issues to get into the specifics where it matters. And I think my statement previously was probably a little too general. So yeah, no, I get what you're saying. No, I totally get what you're saying.
Right.
But from a broad, yeah, no, I get it. I think I'll stop there. I understand. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, let me add in there are at least 35 different genders that have been identified. One of the useful principles that I work with comes from C. Wright Mills, who said there's a connection between history and biography, and as our responsibilities of citizens is to be able to imagine ourselves in the role of the other when it comes to gender. So I would ask you all, here's the question I ask myself when I'm thinking about this. Suppose you were a woman in the hospital and you've just delivered a baby. and the nurse comes in and puts that baby in your arms, and you look down and you see it has two sex organs, different ones, male and female. They're physically in front of you. What's your response? What's our response to the nation?
I mean, that's a great question to ask. I don't have any answer to that, but unfortunately, I do need to drop off.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Sorry to drop
Look forward
a.
to next time. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
It was useful. Thank you.
It reminds me of a conversation I found myself amongst. I wasn't leading it. I wasn't like even really able to really participate as much in it, but it was interesting to sort of watch and observe. Because they were talking about bathrooms and they were talking about, about trans, about gender, nonconforming, all the different, pieces of it. And there were very specific points of view on either side. And most of the people in the room were okay with shared bathrooms or with, being able to choose which bathroom you go into. And there was one person that was stepping up and saying, well, we need to talk about, like, there are women who are uncomfortable to be in a bathroom and in this type of situation. And the response on the other side was, oh, well, they're totally safe, so you don't have to worry about that. And she was trying to make the point, no, like, you do have to worry about that. And they're like, no, you don't. You don't have to worry about that. There was just this assumption of that all you had to do was say the words and then somehow magically there was going to be understanding. And what this person was really trying to make the case about is that, I'll say it this way, which is that some people have been told certain things. Some people have been introduced, to certain things, to have different experiences in their lives. And they are honestly feeling fearful, and they may be lacking information. They may not be lacking information, but there is a real fear there. And just telling them not to fear isn't going to make them not fearful.
I make 2 points, Peter. Pete. One is, above all, what we need to do is educate the population about what's real. There are 35 genders. Maybe there's more now. Maybe they've got it down to less, but that's real. And on your second point, some problems like the one you just mentioned are easy to solve. You have a male bathroom, a female bathroom, and a unisex bathroom, and go where you feel comfortable. End of story. Yeah.
And that actually is a thing that didn't come up until way later into that discussion. But yeah, there are multiple ways to solve that. Like, you just don't go into the unisex bathroom, go into the female bathroom if that's what you feel. But they were trying to come up with, oh, you must comply and let this thing happen in this way. They were so fixed on one solution as a way to protect one part of the populace, and it just sparked this fear in another part of the populace.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear those, I'm just listening to this conversation, and I've had a similar conversation with my nephew. But it's interesting because I think what often happens is that people feel it's almost like a loss of agency, right? Like their voice isn't mattering in the decision. They just want to have the conversation, right? And I think that's what a lot of it is that, so a decision's being made for me, but do I have the agency to speak to that and maybe change something or come up with a different solution? So I think that's it's not so much what the solution is all the time. It's just sometimes, do I have the voice that I can bring so we can at least discuss potential solutions instead of just hearing that's a non-issue, right? I think that's where we get a lot of the fear, is that people are losing their agency and making their own decisions or speaking within their community.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt and I had actually had a conversation with somebody who's very libertarian, And he said it comes down to there's two things, and one of the things that most important to him was consent. And if I do not consent to this thing, then that's at the core of it. And I've heard the same thing in other circles, and in with like trans folks, where it's very much about consent. I am being forced to do things, and I do not consent to these things. And you go and you listen to that woman who was talking about the bathrooms, and it was the same thing. I did not consent to this, and I'm being forced to. I don't have a choice in this. I think you're very right. Like, that to me is popping out as a core thing here that everybody does care about, is being able to consent into a thing that is being imposed upon me. And that's actually the origins where I have difficulties with a more forceful, maybe shall we say, violent, uprising, no matter which side it comes from. Because the core of that thing, even like you look at our Revolutionary War, is imposing something on other people that they did not consent to, which then results in pushback, which then causes other problems until those people now are going to force their way. Whenever we just keep having this force, I'm going to force you to do my thing. Well, I'm going to force you to do my thing. Then it's up to who has the power as to what we do, and still nobody has consent. Did I just solve all problems with that statement? We're all quiet
I just
now.
think I've talked too much, so I'm waiting for others.
No, I don't know if I know what consent is, but I'm trying to think in this context, other examples or how that applies. Although I think you did expanded it to a broader context at the end of what you were saying.
I'm sorry, but
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
on a lighthearted note, when we were just talking about consent, I just have to tell a quick story. My brother-in-law and his wife were here over the weekend, and they have a very big Newfoundland dog, right? Dog's very popular in their college town. They live up in Brown, near Brown and Providence, and a lot of the college girls will come by and take the dog and take it for a walk. And there's one young woman who takes this dog everywhere. She loves their dog. She brings it to parties. She brings it to, like seminars, everything. Well, the dog has a very bad, as most dogs do, to shove his face into people's personal space. And she has taught him consent. And the dog will actually back up and sit down now when she yells consent at it.
That's great. That's good. That's
awesome. Yep.
I like that.
Yes.
Let me tell two quick stories. One is a story about a family that wants to go on vacation, and the son wants to go surfing, and the mom wants to go shopping, and the dad wants to go skiing, and they can't decide where to go on vacation. And then Pete comes in and gets them talking, and they decide, well, let's go to the map, let's go to the atlas and find out where can we do all of those things in the same place, and the problem is solved. There's a lot of situations where that can happen. Then there's a case that I had where there was two tenants on the same floor that were always fighting with each other, and everybody else wanted the problem solved, and the county hired me to solve the problem. Old man and the old woman. So I spent 40 minutes before I realized the problem was unsolvable from the point of view of a collaborative problem-solving process, because the only pleasure that old man got out of life was pissing off that old lady. There was no way that was going to be solved by a collaborative process. And you add to that, the other thing is, when the conflict is so bad that the inequities, the inhumanity, the devastation on one side requires a non-collaborative, non-conflict resolution solution. It requires something more. We celebrate the American Revolution as being one of those instances. So in our quest for a way to solve problems in a peaceful way. Let's not forget, not all problems can be solved that way. Not all problems can be solved, and some can be solved by collaborative methods more than we think, and we need to be able to utilize that more frequently.
I'm not. Let me just say, I've been struggling with that sort of personally. Like, we come from, an origins where, we have what we have in the society and the structures that we had, because there was revolution, and because there was, a war, there was a civil war, there was a variety of different things that we did in order to have the society that we currently enjoy. And then I look at the history of that same thought that was applied in other countries around the globe, where we went in and changed without consent other different, locales in our space. And then on the flip side, going around and spending some time in England and New Zealand and Australia and Canada, they were all places that were under British rule, and they took 5 different ways to get out of it. And there's nothing that says that had we not had a revolution, we would have stayed under the British monarchy. There might have been another way to get out. It's just that's the one we know because that's the path that we took. So for me, the way that I kind of contrast or bring that back around is I tie it to a concrete thing, like with the work that I do, is that sometimes I do have to force teams to do something they don't want to do. And I'm very careful in what I ask them to do in that instance. And I'm very careful about how I get to that point, where I will look at and identify what are the problems that they themselves are experiencing. And I know that this technique is going to get them to the other side. They're not going to understand how it works or why it works until they get there. And I might have to work with their managers and in some places force them to do something they don't want to do and they do consent to doing. But when they get to the other side of the exercise, they realize that this thing solved a whole bunch of problems that were their problems, and they enjoy what's on the other side of it better than where they were before we did this thing that they did not consent to doing, and so that's certainly breaking my own consent rule, but that's why I really drive down the problem so much, is that when we understand the problems that people face and get away from, they will hate us in the short term if we force them to do something they don't think that they want to do, but you have to know that you're doing it for their benefit, not for your benefit. And that's the dichotomy that I think is there. And I know there's hubris in that of, how do you know that this is going to be better for them? And the answer for that in my specific case is because I've just done it 10 times. And, yeah. So that comes down to we don't know what we don't know. And that's the tough part. When do we force something? I'd probably say at the same time, like there's a bunch of other people who have forced, change to happen, maybe too much change too fast, who have the exact same belief that I do. I know when you get to the other side, you will love this and this will be great.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. And that's the problem of, any time of introducing change or coaching or
Yeah.
My
is,
my problem is that since F.A. Hayek, Milton Friedman, and the radical individualistic neoliberalism that's been growing ever since Walter Lippmann, for example, it's gotten to the point where managerial efficiency in the role of government has become more important than democracy. There are too many people in positions of power that think they have the right to make up the values under which they have the right to impose on us. And that's the point where I say, you have crossed a line with me, and I will now resist with everything that I have to the point of giving my life.
mhm. I think we also, well, it's important to keep in mind that we're not the only people who might be looking at that. And it's some of the things that we saw,
I think that's
like
patently obvious.
like the was his name Rittenhouse, Kyle Rittenhouse, who very much believed that he was protecting his community, showed up with his guns and shot a bunch of people who were being protesters, and people on the other side were like, "It's time to get violent. We can't sit around here and take this." And on both sides, there are people who are ready and willing to get violent. And if you start it, and then it happens back to you, it's kind of hard to say, my violence is justified, your violence is not.
But there are cases where you can say that. I'll give you an example. After the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, our soldiers did not get paid. They came back and tried to start farming. In the state of Massachusetts, they got taxed to the point where they couldn't pay the taxes. So Daniel Shays armed himself and went out to, excuse me for a second. I don't get Wi-Fi on the boat, so I'm sorry.
We didn't want to bother you.
Sorry about it. I'm in the clubhouse at the marina because I can't get Wi-Fi on the boat. So a couple of people just went by. I was explaining what we're doing. So Shay armed himself and said, you promised to pay us. You're not paying us. You're not. We risked our lives for this thing, and now you're trying to tax us to death. We've pushed us to the wall. We need to go to Boston with our guns and demand justice. And out of that came what act was it, Pete? The Alien and Sedition Act, which is now in the Patriot Act, which now the President Trump is using in terms of the enforcement against migrants. I would argue that Shays was right, and the people that put down the rebellion were wrong. And out of that came a history of that the tendency over the years has been with laws and regulations that have sided with those that put the rebellion down. So I'm not surprised by Trump. I see it as part of our history, a progression, not a single person. Anyway, that's enough for me tonight. I'll listen for the rest.
There's where does it all tie in? Like, where does it start? Where does it begin? Where does it end? How does it come back together? Had Shays Rebellion not happened, then it wouldn't have resulted in that law, and that law would not have been on the books, for Trump to use now to go after, the people that, he sees as criminal elements, and it gives him the language to do that. And so Shays Rebellion and the people who were there's a lot of people that were like, yeah, they are justified in doing this. and then also look at what happened. It reminds me of that there's a Buddhist parable of a guy working in the field with his son, and the son falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And everybody comes and said, "Oh, what a tragedy of, that, this would happen to you." And he's like, "We'll see." And then, they shortcut a bunch of these things. I don't remember all the different steps of it. But then, like, the army comes to town to to pull a bunch of, the kids. And because he has a broken leg, he doesn't get pulled into the army. And so the villagers all come to the old man and say, "Oh, you're so lucky." He's like, "We'll see." And then it just like compounds this stuff, and
Right.
then everything at every choice. And I'm telling this story really, really badly. But like, you never know
We get
where
your point.
this is going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of these things that we did that were done for the right reasons, have also resulted in things being done for the wrong reasons. And it's just a never-ending back and forth. And so that's why I feel like the ends never justifies the means, because the ends, there's never an ending. It always results in something else. And so I focus on the means as a measure of our choices and our character, to guide us in what we make for the next choice, and the next choice, and the next choice, and the next choice.
So what would you advise the Jews to have done after Kristallnacht?
After which?
Kristallnacht.
Give me more context. I don't know that as the name. Crystal.
The first time the Germans went through the Jewish communities and started random violence.
I couldn't say.
How much oppression can you take before you react?
I'm not saying that you don't react. I'm not saying that you don't do anything about it. I'm not even saying that you don't rise up and push back about it. It's that if you stand up and push back, I don't know. I can't talk to that because I'm not there. I didn't talk to those people. I don't come from that background. I don't know that situation. So anything that I say is going to be biased from my point of view. But
I'm struggling with this myself in so many different ways. I am Jewish, and I am so ashamed and angry at the way the United States is cooperating with Israel to practice genocide against Gaza.
Yeah.
To me, that's an abomination. What is prescribed from a response to that?
I think that gets into some of the closer things, the things that I was so frustrated with Biden when he was still the president.
Yes.
Is he had the choice. He said, "I don't have a choice. I have to do X, Y, and Z." No, you had a choice. You made a choice to not do a thing. And you didn't make a choice to do a thing, but you made a choice to not do a thing.
Yes.
And there were several things that was up to him to sign off on. And he was like, "Well, I just like this. I had to." No, you didn't. Like, there's so many different ways that could have played out. And, his choices really did sink that election.
But what do we do now? That was then. What do we do now? What's my responsibility as a citizen?
For me, I tie back together with what can we do? What can we have in it? Like, we can rage about these different things. We can do No Kings protests. Protests worked in the past because the volume of people marching through the street helped some people to see that, oh my God, like, this is much bigger than I thought it was. I better rethink my position, especially from people in power. These people might march me out of power. People in power right now doesn't matter how many No Kings people show up at a protest. They're not changing
Exactly.
their opinion. They're not doing a damn thing.
Right. So that makes any of the positive and peaceful methods prescribed because they by definition become ineffective. They can't work now.
There are the things that we can change and affect, and the things that have an impact and have an effect. And that's honestly why I'm here as part of Forward.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I'm revealing a side of myself that maybe has not been as obvious to everybody since we started. I love the idea of this book club and what's going on. But if I think maybe at this point I should get off and let you all decide whether or not you want to keep me as part of this group, because clearly, if it's useful for me to part of the discussion, I'm willing to stay. But obviously, there are clear differences in our perspectives on the seriousness of the oppression and the violence that's taking place against the other today, and the limits of how peaceful protest can do anything about it. So I'm going to sign off and say goodnight, and you guys decide whether or not you want to keep me. But I love this group, and you guys are a great guy. And I hope, even if you decide not to keep me in the group because I'm a little too far out for you, at least I hope we can stay friends.
All right, let me say something before you sign off, which is that you are always welcome, and that's one of the core pieces of this and the Forward approach and of the folks that we're coming together, and that of this, like, if you only surround yourself with people who see the world the same way that you do, you are instantly starting from a difficult position. So I can flat out say right now, you are definitely welcome, even if we don't agree on everything.
I wish you could see.
100%.
What?
What was that, Laura?
Go ahead, Laura.
I was just saying 100%. I mean, 200%. I mean, that's why I'm also here too.
Arnie, can I ask, are you, I guess, are you looking for, or are you hoping for more like emotional uproar from us? Is that, I'll just leave it there. Is that a fair question?
That's a fair question, and no, I'm not. My project is to show, by looking at the factors and patterns that have recurred through history, how at turning points and during turning points, ever since the story of Gilgamesh, elite leaders have figured out how to lie and spin in order to gain power, wealth, and governance. And that it is a responsibility of citizens in every time and every place to stay informed of history and to have the analytic tools applied to history that can help them understand the responsibility of citizenship. And one of the problems I see today is we've forgotten, along with the rights that we claim as being a free people, we have forgotten the duties and responsibilities that go with being a member of a democratic society. We are ignorant of the past. We don't understand the present, and we're not taking a stand on a future that we're going for, as our planet is going to self-destruct. How much oil and water and minerals can you extract from the earth before you've done damage to the physicality of the earth being able to survive? How much of the ice can we melt? The Iroquois had this notion of, when you make a decision, make it in terms of the next 7 generations. We're making in terms of stockholders in the next 6 weeks.
I couldn't agree with you more, Arnie. I mean, personally, I have a lot of similar thoughts and a lot of similar frustrations as you're stating there. I think, for me, it's about, trying to figure out what to do with it, what to do with those thoughts, and I guess learning more and being here to figure out what the next steps are. But I share a lot of those frustrations that you just voiced.
But those are the conversations that Pete and I had about starting this project, to see how many people we could get to join and how much conversations like this, how wide we could spread it. And hopefully, I had hoped it would be picked up more by the Forward Party as part of the recruitment process of figuring out policies. And this would be not just historical, but also considering policies other than ranked choice voting, which will be nice down the road, but it's not going to solve our problems in the here and now. And the other thing that I've decided to do is this book that I'm working on, which fortunately has a potential publisher, and if it gets published, then my ideas will get wider. So I'm out there selling the idea that democratic citizens have a responsibility to know their history and apply analytic tools to figure out what we should do as the citizens. The question you're asking, Brendan, is the question I'm getting everybody to ask and start to think about an answer. What needs to be fixed now, and what can we do to fix it? And Forward Party's trying to do that, which is why I joined up with you guys.
Yeah, and I love the name that you put on that. This historical amnesia, and Brandon and I used to do a book club that died. And then when you came back and wanted to do a book club, it was like, oh, okay, maybe we can do this again. There's a thing about the structure of a book club which I don't understand enough, but it requires you to have spent the time to have read the book to then come in and have a discussion about it. But I can say at the same time, the conversations that we've had, that you and I have had, Arnie, that we've had here at the book club, I've used at a variety of other different events, and it have been super effective. But none of those people are going to come to this book club. But the things that we talk about here make an impact.
I'm smiling. I wish I could fix the camera by next time. Hopefully.
Yeah, I called in Matt, because he runs our mingle format events, and a lot of he's like, those things are doing really well, and people are just hungry to hear the voices of other people that do not come from the same background they are. Like, that's the core definition of a mingle event, is show up and meet people who don't read what you read, who don't hear what you hear, and who don't think what you think. And that's the marketing for it. And then people show up and they're like, yeah, I'm here for this. What don't I know?
They're great. I love the ones we go to. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. So, yep. Yeah, which is why it's a very obvious answer to your question before of like, you are definitely here and everybody wants you part of this conversation, because that's what makes us better and stronger. For me, I just tie that back around. Like, we're all, I think, solving the same problems.
Yes.
And we do disagree on what those solutions are.
Yes.
But we're united in trying to find a way to solve these. So, I
think there's one way in which we are all united, and I simply say analytic philosophy. What are the meaning of words? Like, we could have a one session just on what it means to be woke and how it's being used to keep us unwoke. And we do a bit of that every single time. So, part of the problem of the differences between us is not that the differences are so great always. It's just that we have different meanings to the words, and we don't really clarify it. So, like tonight, we did equality. There's at least 4 different definitions of equality, and I don't buy the ones that she came up with.
Yeah, I don't either.
So that to me was the most useful thing. Well, God, no, how do you pick? It was a useful thing that came out of tonight. There was so much that was useful, and I'm appreciative.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to your specific question, like, this really is, and I'm going to give you credit on this, the historical amnesia. I think there's an aspect of this as well. When we do something now, that was done in the past and that failed in the past. And we do it again now because we believe that it will have an effect this time when it never had effect before. I look at that also as historical amnesia.
Agreed.
You know, and
I keep putting in little words because you can't see my face. So.
Yeah.
I want you to know what I'm agreeing.
No, I appreciate that. You know, and it's like I do not. It's like the struggle, just like with the No Kings in it. You know, like they're the struggle. Like I get what people are trying to do, and it's creating this community on it, but it's happened several times over, and it's not making a difference in a change. And then I know other things like what's happening in the Democratic establishment, wherein they're using this to drum up and keep people occupied so that they go out and vote. It's a way to keep people sustained. It's not driven towards overcoming what's happening, but that's the story that they tell. The real intention of the organizing from the part of some people, I can't say for everybody, is to just give Democrats something to do but until the election comes up about so that they will vote Democrat in the next election. And the intent...
Let me just say something. Starting with Jimmy Carter, over and over again, through Bill Clinton, through Obama, all of them, the Democratic Party has moved to become Republican Party light. There is no Democratic Party left. My Democratic Party has left me. FDR was my Democratic Party, after which we had Social Security, we had improved education, we had the GI Bill of Rights, and from afterwards, from after FDR up until 1968, inequality was decreasing, equality was increasing, and the quality of life of people was improving. Starting in 1968, wealth, power, and influence and governance has been moving up now to where the level of inequality is obscene and democracy is dead, and we've moved into an authoritarian government. So when we talk about Democratic and Republican, do not put me in the Democratic Party. Do not put me in the Socialist Party. But for me, that Democratic Party died in '68.
So,
It's just part of the Republican Party.
I mean, to me, a through line, if I'm going to try to put it as simply as I can, to me, the through, when I read these books, especially the last two, and you know, we didn't have to read the books to know some of this, but the through line is just the powerful don't like to lose what they have, right? I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I know we, you know, there's all like, to me, that's the through line. It's like, okay, you start changing legislation and you're raising taxes and you try to bring balance, and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, the powerful don't like to lose what they have. And I would say in general, people don't like to lose what they have. But when you have people with insane amounts of stuff or insane amount of power, you know, ridiculous amount of wealth, that's even more of what they have to protect. And yeah, the obscene amount of wealth inequality that you had just previously mentioned, Arnie, it's like people are living in a different world in terms of what they have to prioritize to keep that, right? And yeah,
And we're in the middle. We're in the middle of a change where it's getting worse. If you all reading the news, you all know about the companies that are laying off 30,000 people. You all know we're taking away Social Security and healthcare. So we're getting the cheap labor out of the country. We're creating policies that are letting the elderly die off because they're not going to get the health care that they've been used to. And they're laying off 30,000 people at a time from different companies. Why are they doing that? The robots are coming. Artificial intelligence is coming. They don't need us. So let's get rid of them. Let's call these illegal immigrants the evil people and cast them out. Let's take away the health care and let the old folks die, because we're going to have robots and we don't need them. That may be a fantasy in my mind, but that's the way I see what's happening.
Hmm. But if the actually, I'll credit this to actor training. We used to have to do an exercise of the as if, not the what if, but the as
Good
if.
one. Yeah.
So to find out, to understand something that we had never experienced, you had to like look around to a bunch of different things and say, this experience in play is as if this other thing was happening in my life. And then you could make that connection in, because now you could tie it to something that you knew and something that you had felt. And so when I do, so my mind does these as if connections all the time. And like I see that like what you just described in what people are trying to do with the robots, with AI right now, is the same language in an as if comparison with the robber barons and the railroads and Carnegie before he developed a conscience and Rockefeller and all of these folks were doing the same thing, but doing it under cheap labor. And then you go back, Revolutionary War, and that was the slavery part. The only way we're going to succeed and build a country is if we have people that we don't have to pay. All of it was a falsehood inside of there, and we've done this over and over and over again. So part of this does not surprise me that people are like, oh yeah, the AI is here, the robots are here, and then we'll just have a society that's because we did that and we got past it, and not by passivity by any means whatsoever. We got to do something to change it, but we are going to repeat the same mistakes, historical amnesia, if we don't know and pay attention to the fact that we have been here before and there was a way that we got out of it before.
And there is a solution.
Yeah, there is a solution, and we know what that solution is as a society.
You tax the robots and the AI as if they were the people doing the work, and use the taxes to give people a living wage, a universal basic income. This ain't rocket science.
Yeah,
it's denial.
I think I don't know if comparing this, right, it based on what I've read and my understanding, that we've been here before in terms of like comparing this to the Gilded Age and the early 1900s. To me, it seems different, and I know I don't know what it felt like then because I wasn't around, but it seems different in that we've either created or become aware of multiple existential threats to humanity where that either didn't exist or people weren't aware of at that time, whether it's catastrophic climate change, the threat of nuclear war, the alignment problem with AI, and whether or not that the larger percentage. We talked about this, Pete, a few weeks ago about whether or not AI could wipe out humanity. So like I feel like those looming existential threats that, to the best of my knowledge, are non-0% probability of happening. On top of everything else, it's a lot. So I'm not saying we can't get out of it, but it seems like we're not helping ourselves by layering on more existential threats to ourselves, on top of all the power dynamics and income inequality and everything. I don't know what to do with that thought, but there's a lot there, and it's almost too much to try to think about it all at once, and maybe that's why we have to start small and local, think locally at times, but when these go ahead.
I like that. My local choice is ICE. I've been inside Maryland's prisons. I've been inside the Hickey School. I know the lack of medical care and the other things that go on there. The notion that we're taking these abandoned buildings and allowing ICE to go in there and recreate these monstrous settings where people people should not just have to live like that. But there's all kinds of stuff going on in the here and now in Baltimore, in Maryland.
Yeah.
We could make a choice to say it may be happening elsewhere, but it is not going to happen here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like Mr. Porter. One of the things, like let's work on that. Like let's tackle some of these things. We have to come together and like do. It's one of the things that I've been really enjoying. Enjoying is a bad word to sort of use over here, but about some of the stories that I'm hearing coming out of Minnesota, because they were really looking at and breaking down how does the system work, what can we do, how can we have a change of effect. Setting up a whole variety of different things. When this happens, this was response that we had, and so they adapted on the ground, and they came up with this thing, and they had this other plan that happened, and then the ICE changed their tactics, and so they changed their thing, and it sounded to me much more like the same stories that I've heard for the civil rights movement. All the things that they were trying, the training they were doing that led up to, was it Claudette Colvin who didn't get up on the bus, but then, I might be mixing up names, I'm bad with names, but they didn't put her up, they put Rosa Parks up for the media effect, and all of that was set up and planned to have a particular setup of an instinct, and they were looking for all these different opportunities that they didn't know which one was going to hit at which order. And that's a thing that we could be doing right now. And I'd rather we do that than go march.
Yes.
The difference between activism and protest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is another thing I was saying to somebody else to say quickly, which is that the difference between the Million Man March back then was it was after all of these things. And so they had already brought it up to the public's eye, and then they marched. So people could see the volume of people involved, and that.
Let me give you some historical context, Pete.
Sure.
The same thing happened with Lincoln and Douglas.
Okay.
Martin Luther King and all of the leaders of the civil rights movement were meeting on a regular basis for years.
Yeah.
Just building the fact that we need to have a protest in order to get the press to talk about the protest, in order to have the movement to Washington, in order to get Lyndon's ear, because otherwise Lyndon is not going to talk to us.
Yeah.
So I happened to be by accident at Miriam Anderson's estate with a meeting of all of those leaders way before the marches happened. And so I was there in 1959 and 60 and saw Miriam Anderson and the elite of the Black community saying, okay, we need to have this peace. We'll get the buses, we'll get people to march, we'll get the press involved, we'll build this slowly, we'll make sure it's going to be peaceful. We'll have guards out there to show people where they need to go and where they need to stand. Make sure they don't bring placards with sticks and all these other things. And when that happens, Lyndon will have to listen, and then Martin can talk to him, and then we can make something happen.
Yeah. There's a setup and plan. In the corporate world, there's dependencies. There's a whole thing that needs to happen, and we know this needs to happen. But in order for step 205 to happen, this step 300, 126 has to happen. In order for that to happen, step 52 has to happen. In order for that to happen, and so even though you want to do the thing at the end of like the march in this scenario that we're talking about, there's a couple things that had to happen before that to make the march effective.
Who's going to pay for the gas? Where we're going to get the buses? Yeah, all of that.
We're not doing the traceability, back to it. And actually, that's a little bit of my response when you bring up RCV. I can, if you want to walk through the logic, I can show you why RCV makes a difference, not because RCV itself is going to change the world, but because it's a prerequisite to another thing that's a prerequisite to a third thing that will change the world.
Sure.
Yeah. and it's hard to get people motivated to do dependencies and work on the pre things, because that's not where the fun is.
No, that takes a smaller group.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it gets the thing that Matt's talking about and other people are talking about. It's like it's
Can I
hard to
throw in a
build a party
suggestion?
built on RCV.
There's something that surprises me that maybe PJ and you guys can do something about. We have amazing universities and colleges in Baltimore. We have three amazing foundations: the Community Able Foundation, the Zoris Foundation, and so on. When you turn on the news, you get some preacher from some community that talks about what we need to do is be tougher on them because what some silly solution. Maybe the Forward Party of Maryland could organize the most knowledgeable people from the foundation community and from the intellectual community to come together and talk about possible problems to work on and possible solutions.
Would love to. We're getting closer and closer, in being able to have a seat at the table, to host a table,
Yes.
and then have them sit at our table.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's steps, and there's steps going the opposite direction. So there's already people who are like, oh, don't talk with
Yeah.
them.
Yep.
Oh yeah, see that table. So when those people show up, don't have anything to do with them.
Yeah. Which table am I at?
Yeah, I've been at tables. We're having fantastic conversation, and then somebody walked up and said, this is the Forward Party, right? They're like, this is. I gotta go. There was something that had been structured around this where they had already discussed and said, like, you should not be seen with these people. And then a couple years later, those people are now wanting to be seen with us. We can get around it, we can get there, but there are forces that are consciously telling people to stay away.
Yes.
And it's just we get to a point where we're like, no, like we're just here to solve problems. And when people realize we're just here to solve problems, collaboratively together, then they're like, why was I so afraid of this group?
Brandon,
They
you're
would-
smiling.
No, I was just laughing. It's like stay away from the kind, logical bridge builders. Stay away from those people. They're up to no good.
But it's a little bit out of that bias, right? Because they don't know us, and that's just where the patience comes in. We may look like a bunch of people who've shown up in the past and weren't logical and weren't problem solvers. And we're always going to have to face that. And the only thing we can do is stay true to ourselves and be logical problem solvers.
Mhm.
And eventually people will see it.
Yeah, and nothing happens overnight, right?
Yeah, right. And we'll break through the historical amnesia, or at least this phase of it.
At least it's
Yeah.
space.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if it was one of the books we read recently or if it was a different book that someone gave me. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, this goes, I think it goes to what Braver Angels are doing and everything. Like it's the whole contempt for the other people, um, regardless of where it comes. That contempt. If you have contempt for them, it makes them stick their feet in the ground even more, right? Or drives them further away from you if you show that contempt. So that's where while it's it's really hard at times. That's why that bridge building is so important. It seems like. So try to stay away from contempt, even if you, in your head, you just like, with every fiber of your being, you hate what you see. Um, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Arnie, is like when you're up against the wall, what other option do you have? Um, yeah, it's hard. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking about this book walking into tonight. How Minds Changed by David McRaney. And was going to propose that as maybe that's the thing for us to do, or May and June.
Yeah, I'd be cool with a change of pace. Like I said, I did like this book because it was an easier read than We the People.
Oh yeah,
But it was where it was an easier read, so it didn't go into as much depth. But I felt like, yeah, at times We the People felt, felt very deep
yeah.
on the historical context. Very, very a lot of like detailed examples of people in history, which is good. Which is good. But
It's
yeah,
a trade-off,
I'd be cool
right?
with a change of pace. What'd you say?
It's that trade-off, right? You know,
Yeah.
because there was so much there, but we learned new things from Joe Lepore, and we held the same thing here. This was an easier book, but we didn't feel like we
Yep.
really learned anything new from Heather Cox Richardson.
Yeah. I think my opinion about this book was definitely influenced by having just read Joe Lepore's book.
I
Because
absolutely agree.
Yeah.
It talked a lot about a lot of similar things, but in a much more condensed way. Yeah. So I don't know.
And there's somebody I followed, Ted Stormer, that I've told you about. His book, The Resistance History of the United States, is coming out in June, and he does not like Richardson. He considers her a lightweight that relies too much on the myth of equality and not enough on the work that the Constitution does in terms of suppression. I think Lepore is a much better scholar, more interesting, deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one example I can think of, and again, I'm not going to get the details right, but I think I had heard even before I read either of these last two books that, the story of Lincoln being the savior for abolition there's more to it than that. Like he wasn't like the only, right? There's a lot more to the abolitionist movement, and actually, how the slaves were freed. And how that came about. And I think, Arnie, you may have even talked about this at times, how that there's much more to the Lincoln story. And I felt like Joe Lepore went into that,
Deeper,
the truth, a lot deeper about like what Lincoln was really about, and like how there's much more to the abolition movement. And then when you read about Lincoln in Heather Cox Richardson's book, it was very from the Lincoln was the savior stamp. At least it felt like they didn't go into nearly as much depth, and you kind of read it in a way that Lincoln came in to save the day.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and it's like Jefferson. Jefferson, we quote a lot of the quotes that come from the Enlightenment, and we don't quote a lot of the things that were said more privately.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson was also an enslaver and a rapist.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to what you were saying, Pete, in terms of offering up a different book, I know because you met that guy, you met the author at the Braver Angels conference, right?
Yeah.
That's the guy. Yeah.
Yep.
So wait, have you already read the book? You already read that?
I did. I did read.
Yeah. Okay. I have not. That one or something. Again, I know I'm just one person, but a change of pace, I think would be cool.
Something positive, something that tells us what we can do. Sounds good.
That's why I think of this one. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. I'm reading a tome of a book right now called The Guest of the Ayatollah about the Iranian hostage crisis. So it'll be nice to have something like this.
Yeah. So here's the.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So he goes and actually like tells the story. He was a news person, but like deep dive news. Spend a lot of time with an issue and getting anything, and so he really like comes to the idea of what actually works versus what makes a good story.
Leave it up for a second. I just found a pen.
Yeah, I like the way you just framed that, Pete.
Yeah.
What makes a good, yeah, versus what makes a good story.
Hmm.
Got it.
Yeah. And I think one thing about this into it is like it's different from person to person,
Mm-hmm.
which means it's harder. But, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm not here because it's easy.
So what you just said reminds me, so I do all this trail running and long distance running and stuff. And there's this group of guys who will show up at some of these races and they have this big, big sign and it says, "We don't do this because it's easy." And then it says in very small print, "We do it because we thought it was going to be easy."
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
That's great. All right. So you guys agree?
We agree.
Yeah, I'm up
Yep.
for this one.
Cool with this.
Okay.
No,
So
thanks,
do we
James.
want to, is enough time within a month? Or do we want to go further out?
So you read it already. What's your take on comparing the length to what we recently read?
Yeah. How long a read? How many pages and how long a read? How easy a read?
Yeah, actually, let me look up the pages on
Yeah,
this.
I'm pulling it up now too. How minds change.
I mean, it definitely felt more like the one we just read
Mhm.
than Jill Laporte's book.
Okay.
Yeah, so here we go, 352 pages.
I would go for 2 months out because I'm under the gun. If I might get this contract in the next couple of weeks, or I won't get the contract. But if I do get the contract, then I've got to complete the manuscript in 12 months. So, but if you want to meet earlier, if you want to keep meeting monthly, I will make time for it because I think this is important. So I'll leave it up to you guys.
I mean, we could meet later in the month of May if we wanted to do that.
Do like
Give
a month and a
little more
half.
time.
Yeah, so we would have been up next on, I guess, second. I think it was the second, like on the second Thursday. So the 14th.
14th.
But we could also push it out to the 28th.
Mhm.
And then we would basically skip June and come back in July.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that.
You're talking about May 28th?
May 28th?
Is that what you said?
Yep, that's what I said.
Still a Thursday,
Still
right?
Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday.
I can do that.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
I'm glad to hear you're coming back, Arnie, or you're not leaving.
I was gonna
I
say
didn't want to leave. I just wanted to leave it up to you guys because
No.
after all this time, it's clear that I'm a little left of center in this group. At least I think I am.
I like that.
Yeah. No, I was gonna if Laura didn't say it, I was also gonna say I'm happy that you stayed to the end of the call, Arnie.
Yeah.
Me too. Thank you. I wish you could see me smiling.
I know.
Well, I think you also said something that resonated with me was that we are the definition of what left and right is and what Democrat used to be versus Republican used to be is not the same thing it was when I was growing up, when you were growing up, and we're in a different world now. So like I have trouble just even having
It's become meaningless.
leftist. There's no
The labels are meaningless.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to use them, and when I find myself saying them out loud, I'm like, "Dang it, Brandon, you don't want to use those words," but it's just so much part of our vocabulary these days, and it's like
It keeps us stuck.
it does. It keeps us stuck, and I think it just this even a well-intentioned people using those words keeps the divide. it maintains the divide by using those words. At least, yeah, at least that's the way I feel. So it's like, so when it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, why'd you say left leaning, Brandon?
I did.
And
Yeah, it's why I couldn't stick with Braver Angels. Like I love what they're trying to do, but because at their core they identify people as red and blue, and they force people to take on roles as red and blue, it reinforces this polarization, and I couldn't take it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. I think I remember feeling the same way, Pete, and I wonder if it's like that might just be a specific tool for for those people that need it, right? That need that tool because they're so far in one color or the other. But when you're coming at it like we are, and we're like, we don't want to see it that way. It's like we feel like their end goal is to yeah, not
Mhm.
is to be forward essentially.
That's
might-
why I left no labels, because
Yeah.
they label themselves. They in their private conversations they say we're center right, and in my definition they're more than center right. And so when they get a Democrat and a Republican talking to each other, the Democrat that they have is you've got this wonderful word in the Republican Party, Republican in name only. We need the same label in the Democratic Party. I don't know. Maybe somebody can come up with one and get famous.
Well, I think there's already a dino.
And Dino.
Oh, Dino. Okay, I love it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, I might go back. So, I mean, to be fair to Braver Angels, I might go back in and take a look at them if I've got time. Because I've heard that recently they have allowed for a three-part. Because it used to be that like in order to start a local chapter, because I had somebody that wanted to start a local chapter here in PG County, and we couldn't find a red that would start the chapter with us, and we couldn't start it. And I was like, well, I'm independent. And they're like, nope, not good enough. It's got to be red. You cannot start unless you get somebody who is red. And so there's all these things that just never happened. And it eventually got back, and I heard that lately they've been saying, all right, you can be one of three colors, red, a blue, or white. And red, blue, and independent. And now you can start a group if you have an independent and a red, or an independent and a blue.
Interesting. Yeah.
Moving.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It's a step in a direction, which is important. Like you can't just jump to a place,
Right.
a step to get there. But when you take that step to then force people that they can't go beyond that step, that was where I was starting to have troubles.
No, I definitely see it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
All right.
yeah. All right.
Well, a pleasure
Thanks,
again, as usual, folks.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Always good talking to
Arnie,
you.
good luck with your book deal.
Yeah, hopefully next time we're together, I will say yes.
Yes. Hopefully.
And hopefully next time I'll have the camera working.
Fingers
All rooting
crossed.
for you.
Fingers crossed on both accounts.
Yes. On both
Okay.
accounts. Yes.
Until again, I look forward to it.
All
All
right.
right, everyone.
Have a nice night.
You
Bye,
too.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.